getting in the thick of it now. The promo time is over, we're actually going to talk about why we're here tonight. So, as I said, when Steve offered to come for us to join forces, it was a bit of a no-brainer because, as you might have noticed, Figma is kind of moving from being a developer-only platform to, sorry, designer-only platform, ooh, freudian slip, to being a full product encompassing platform, essentially. And the vision that we have is kind of reflecting of that, which is that we really want to make it easier for teams to just go from ID all the way into the final product as fast as they can with the highest quality possible. And it's something that I personally, as a designer, based on the experience I've had prior to Figma, I'm fully on board. I feel like, based on the experience I had, the moments I worked as a designer the most tightly with developers were the best moments, where we build the best products. So I'll be the first advocate for that, no matter what. You might have heard of this, this little thing called Dev Mode that we released recently. So we're really taking this vision that we have to bring developer on board and bridge that gap between ID and product. We're looking at bringing that into the actual product developments, the investments we make into product directly. And we're also looking at investments in research, actually. And I think this is where I really wanted to open up tonight, because I think that's just like a really great segue into what the discussion will be about. We've recently launched this report called Decode the Developer. It's available in French and English, and I'll put the QR codes at the end. But essentially, we interviewed 200 front-end devs to just ask a bit about what's their experience as of today, working more broadly in, with other cross-functional expertise in their organizations. And just a few of the highlights. I don't know if these are going to be surprising for you guys or not, but less than half of developers say that they actually work on a day-to-day basis with designers, which to me personally as a designer feels a bit small and makes me a bit sad. But there is, I think, a clear opportunity that's identified specifically by developers, right? Because 80% of developers said that if we were to collaborate more tightly overall, there would be a business impact. And I think 55% of people that were interviewed as well said that it would completely have an impact on speed to market, specifically. And it's nice to see that front-end developers also dream about being involved in the design process, because more than half of front-end developers interviewed actually said that they would really, really like to be brought into the design process earlier. I'm kind of concerned about the other 45%, to be honest. I hope you guys are okay. But a quarter of them say that they feel like this is extremely hard to do in their current organization. And I'm really, really hoping that the conversation we have tonight actually sheds a bit of light on as to why that might be. And finally, I'm just putting that one because that one's spicy and that one scares me. I don't code. And apparently 91% of you all think that I should. So what's happening here? I think there's definitely, it's more of a manifestation hypothesis here of just gaps maybe in communication that we have yet to bridge, whether that's through the way we talk to each other or the tools that we use. And yeah, I think on this, I'm basically, oh, by the way, yeah, I said I would put the scans, so there you go, English, French, if you guys want to get the full report with the rest of the numbers. But I think that's why we feel really, really strongly, based on all the insights that we have, based on the feedback we get, both from designers and developers, we really feel like there needs to be those spaces for conversations. And that's what we're hoping to create tonight. So thank you all for coming. I'm very excited with being able to partner with Steve and with the panelists that we were able to get tonight. So I'll leave it to you.
Time to introduce them, right? So Yu Ling Cheng, you are a software engineer at Pigment. You will be here with us tonight, so thank you for joining us. Pedro Hernandez is a DesignOps manager at Datadog, so he will be representing all of you designers tonight. And Loick Le Digabel is the former CTO of Slowy and former front-end lead of Black Market, and he will be here as well, as an engineer and as an engineering leader, so thank you for coming. And yeah, that's all of us. So great to have you here. We're going to give a very quick intro, kind of like fun facts about all of you, so we get to know our speakers, and then basically we're going to move on throughout the evening from like the perspective of front-end engineers to the perspective of people who work with them. So Yu Ling, you've been starting to code at 14. You started on a small website, which some of you might know, called Neopets. And that's what kind of brought you to engineering studies. And yeah, you do like to do creative projects, and well, I think you're kind of keen to work with designers, right? You like to craft, I would say. Pedro, you've been here in France for 15 years. You have joined us to work initially as actually, well, even before, 20 years ago, you were a front-end engineer. So you are quite accustomed to our job. You won 3 editing awards for editing documentaries and short films as well. So yeah, definitely a very broad resume as well. And Loki, on top of being a great tech leader, you also have a passion for basketball and the NBA, right? And you also have a name that lends itself very well to great nicknames. So we'll stick with Loki tonight. You can call him Loki, he's used to it. Right, so to kickstart things, I'd like to kind of talk about, as front-end engineers, and I'm also a front-end engineer by training, where we struggle to be heard and where we kind of like need support and help from other parts of the organization. So starting with you, Yu Ling, what's your opinion on this? Where do you feel that we struggle to be heard?
So can everyone hear me? Cool. On my side at Pigment, I'd say regarding collaboration with other teams, we're not too bad. We are involved at the different designing process, specs, and within development, we still work hand in hand with designers. But I'd say where we would struggle would more be with other front-end developers, because we're scattered in different teams. Usually there's one front-end per team. There's one team where there are other front-ends. So for reviews, for instance, we need to do reviews across teams and get the context on the features. And this also brings some struggles regarding evolution as a front-end engineer inside the company, because if your peers that are working and reviewing your work are not working in the same team as you are, then how do you get the feedback on how you're doing your job well? It's the same for your managers. Most of the managers are either full stack or back-end developers. So how do they relate to your work? How can they acknowledge and recognize what you've been doing? On our side, we try to figure that out, and we count on feedbacks that we collect from the other developers. And we've also advocated a lot to be recognized as front-end engineers, and to maybe put down the sets of skills of front-end engineers that we would want to aim for. There are different flavors for front-end engineers. You have the front of the front, so more the UI part and UX part, and you have the back of the front, so everything that's plugging in with APIs, having live reload, having caches and things like that. And so having these different type of models within the company will help people, assimilate to different tracks and then evolve within the company.
All right. Loic, do you have any kind of tips or experience on the topic of recognizing the technical skills of a front-end engineer?
Yeah. Do you hear me? Yeah, it's good. Recognizing technical skills on front-end engineers. First of all, I agree the front-end skills is now super broad, so I understand when you say you have 2 kind of front-end engineers. But yeah, I think people have affinity, and you can be led by your passion. This is a broad topic to tackle. You have a lot of things to do in the companies in general. So if you are particularly interested by the UI, people will go on it by themselves on the project, and then it's easy to support this kind of initiatives from people, and to give them afterwards, okay, you want to work on this, you want to dig further, and these people will also be the first ones to report what you need to do to go to the next step. So it's kind of by design, you have it like this, and then your organization needs to be there to empower these kind of people, to let them lead what they wanna do, because it's likely to help you to reach the next steps.
Super insightful, thank you. Still on you, would you say that there are specific topics or areas where it's difficult to get support from the organization for front-end engineers?
first of all, just like any technical roadmaps, you need to be part of the organization, like to be recognized within the organization. Like if you only have engineers in squads, like I'm talking about big teams, not only when you are 2 engineers, obviously, but when you have a lot of squads, when you start to have a bigger product than your MVP, and it's getting harder and harder to maintain, to evolve in many directions. So you need to have people to trust, so to build the design system here, or even the whole application architecture. So for this, I think the first requirement to have is to be empowered within the organization, to have a role which is not within a squad, because you will have your scope completely biased by your squad, but you also need to be on the table where you have a word to say within the roadmaps, because there will be things that you will see and other business people won't see. So first of all, I think you need to be there. But also, you will be facing some people talking about roadmaps every day. Not every people want to do that. But when you are on this table, you need to know how to act to push for your projects. There are a lot of projects, could be on design, on engineering. You're like, hey, it could be great to do that. Yes, but how do you sell your project? And I think it's important also to be able to put your project on the same level as people putting projects in a roadmap. Because otherwise you could be like, okay, I find a way, for example, to, I don't know, build a design system, it's going to be better, or to improve performances of my app. If you're talking to other designers or to other engineers, they will understand, and it could be no-brainer within a team of your skill. But when you're talking to someone like non-tech people, or even like business marketing people, not really understanding your daily job, you need to be able to talk about the same thing. So when you talk about, for example, improving milliseconds on your app, when they come and say, okay, I have an idea, it could bring 10 million on the table next month, what project is going to win? Mm-hmm. So you need to be able to understand what they would expect, to put your project as well on the table or on the roadmaps. Or, again, your organization could say that, okay, you have 10% of whatever you want, we trust you, do it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you need to have the support of the organization for this.
So is it a case of translating basically the impact or the outcome of the different technical projects that we have in terms that the business understands?
Yeah, I think you have this for leadership in general, because if you think about it, a design system, this is not the final product of your company in general. Like, you provide a service for the other teams. So that's also why it's usually kind of difficult to create this kind of teams. I'm sure you all got it. I see you smiling. And the reason why is, like, when people complain about this, it's usually because they don't understand why you need a team for that. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of roles in companies. You could have, on the technical side, you could have SREs, for example. They are not building the product directly, but at some point, we all agree we need them. For design system, I think it's the same. You don't ship the product directly on production, but you help teams to go faster, to build better things, etc. And you need to be able to advocate this, because this kind of KPIs will help you to bring the topics on the table and get some people, resources, or whatever to build this project. And if you're only saying that, or speaking even emotionally, saying, yeah, this is important, I know this is great, I know this is good, this is just a word versus a word, you cannot sell it properly.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
Can I react on what you've been saying? I can totally relate to what you're saying, especially on the technical roadmap. So every quarter we are asked as engineers to push some topics to the roadmap. And every quarter, all the front-end topics, they just go on the side, because the people deciding do not relate to the impact, or they do not feel it's important enough to take them in. And we had one big struggle with migrating to React 18. So we all know how important it was, because all the behaviors that come with it was breaking, and it would break a lot of things on the platform, so we could not just do it on the side. And at some point, we did advocate a lot for that and insist on the impact. And oh, we've got a new chief of security is going to come down to us asking us to do updates, and then React is not up to date, so we cannot update our libraries, and then you'll have security issues. So this is going to be pressing. Let's not be late on these updates. And in the end, we ended up managing to allocate all the time of all the front-end engineers for 1 week just to focus on this upgrade. So that means freezing the other features. And I think it's great to have an environment where you could be heard regarding such problematics and give ways to important topics when you're able to advocate for it. And that's the hardest part.
All right. We'll now turn to Pedro with the non-front-end perspective. Are there situations as a DesignOps leader where you've kind of like advocated for processes that support front-end engineers directly?
Yes. Oh, it's weird. Yeah, I don't know if people can hear me or not, but Datadog is a very specific situation where I live in the land of engineers, so to speak. So Datadog is a product oriented towards engineers. So we have basically user zero all over the place. And if we do something stupid, they will complain. We have even like a Slack rant channel for that, which is great. I think there have been many initiatives. I think we don't have the problem of specifically front-end not being recognized. So we have a team called Front-End Foundation that includes a bunch of different front-end teams. Front-enders are also embedded into teams. If this gives you an idea, they sit together in the cafeteria, they relinquish their desks, and they just go and squat a big table at the cafe, and they work together all day. But to answer your question about from the perspective of DesignOps, what are we doing to support them? We have done many experiments, but the latest one, which I'm very hopeful about it, is we have been integrating engineers into the user research process. So they are attending the different sessions. They are not also attending, but being part of the debrief. So there's a debrief after those sessions. They can react. They can also ask questions. And like I said, since we have, so our users are also front-end engineers and back-end engineers and SREs and every type of engineer. So sometimes they even have more in common during a user research session with the user. So they can actually ask like more technical questions that designers or researchers sometimes miss. So they have been having an impact in simply like how deep we can go with every interview, every survey that we do. So I'm very hopeful that that is gonna like pick up steam and become like a pattern that we repeat all over the place. But yeah, other than that, there have been many experiments about bringing more like documentation that we can share with them. We were talking about in my team in DesignOps, I have a Figma genius who build in-house plugins for us, and so we're working between him and developer experience, which is our own like DevOps part, trying to come up with modules that we can add and plugins that we can put in place in Figma to bring engineers into the space of designers and have a more fluid conversation.
Cool, that's awesome. All right, well, it's a really great transition. If we want to talk about how designers and engineers kind of come together to work, I think you both have slightly different perspectives. So let's hear Yu Ling first on how you got people to collaborate together on a design system at Pigment.
So at Pigment, we were lucky to start early building the design system blocks. And then we just let it live its life. And every team would just pick the components they need and build it features. And at some point, it became a bit messy. We started feeling some frustrations using it. There were inconsistencies in the design system, so it was not clear what component to use, in what case, what variants, and how to make it evolve. And so I wanted to do something about it. And there were different steps towards having people work on the design system, because we didn't have any time allocated officially on design system. We didn't have a dedicated team for the design system. So I started gathering champions, both on the design side and on the front-end side, to advocate and be the leaders of this task force that I created for the design system. And so for the front end, to convince them, it was the arguments were, hey, we're not working a lot together because we're working in different teams, so let's work on a topic that we both like, and yeah, let's experience and learn from each other on this topic that we find interesting. And on the design side, to convince them, it was not that hard either, because they had a lot of features or adjustments they wanted to make on the design system. So having people that are actually interested in doing them was great for them. So we had those champions, and then we went recruiting over the team to say, hey, we want to work on this topic. Let's meet up every week, once a week. Let's spend 1 hour on a Friday. As you know, you're very productive on a Friday, so let's take some time to work with people that care about the same topic as you do, and try to list out some stuff. And it was not easy at start. We just sat around the table. There were people on remote, and we were like, okay, how do we start? And I think there was a barrier at that point, because people were remote. We were not working with each other on a daily basis because we were on different teams. So we had to find a way to break the ice. And a tool that we use was retrospective. So it's quite common. It's quite time consuming, because you go around the table, you ask everyone, hey, what's your experience with the design system? How do you feel about it? It takes a lot of time, but at the same time, if you show that everyone can be heard, can give their opinion, then it starts building trust within each other. So some people that would feel intimidated by others because, yeah, they look very experienced, you haven't talked to them yet, or barely spoke through Slack, then just having this conversation, very casual, hearing about what everyone suffers about, and you can relate to it, it's really helps breaking the ice, and that really started the conversation that we had. And then from there, from all the feedbacks that we gathered, we decided to focus on the main priorities, and that's how we started building up our path to having a better design system. And yeah, throughout the years, we started that maybe 3 years ago. Throughout the years, we found a different setup to work with, and now we work asynchronously. We don't have a 1 hour meeting every week because we all hate meetings. So we do everything asynchronously on a Slack channel, where every thread is a conversation about an update about a component, or a question about how do I use this, or does it make sense to use it like this? And then the other community would just reply, have a discussion, and decide what's the best course of action. And to take decisions, we set up a set of guidelines that we all aligned on based on the design system purpose for a company. As we're scaling, we want a design system that is quick to use, so let's not open up all possibilities to the variants or customization on each component, because we want to ensure consistency. If we don't have too much design resources, then we need the developers to make choices, or make choices fast. And if you narrow down the possibilities, then you help them, definitely. I could go on and on, so I don't know if you guys want to react on it, or share how you've been experiencing the thing.
I've definitely been wanting to ask Pedro as well about the start of the Datadog design system. And just to kind of sum up what you said, Yu Ling, you've started with a bit of kind of human elbow grease, getting people to know each other, to relate to each other, so that they would kind of like dare to speak up about things that they wanted. And this is something that I think a lot of people in like startups and small environments, we felt that it's super useful to get people together and build rapport. And at the same time, when you grow larger, and you've already experienced this at Pigment, right? You start having, you're no longer able to pay the kind of human price and the time price to run these kind of processes, and you start needing something else. And Pedro would be really interested in knowing how you handle collaboration between Paris and New York in specific, and of course how you handle like communication within the design system.
Okay. So our design system is a little bit older than yours. Ours is 5 years old. Um, and the thing that accelerated the design, so it started same thing, a group of designers and engineers being motivated about it. The thing that accelerated things was there was an acquisition in Paris. This is why we have a Paris office, because that was like a big acquisition at the time. And we realized, well, they realized, it was 1 year before I arrived. So they realized that this acquisition came with, I think, 70 engineers, let's say like 10 or 15 front-end engineers, who had very different coding practices, like a full different stack, a full different way of organizing things. And this is the thing that accelerated the design system more as an equalizer. So our design system is engineering first. That has always been the case. We still have that mantra of the source of truth is the actual React component, is not
Same.
the Figma, the Figma object. And this acquisition, so part of these front-end people who arrived with the acquisition, this is why the design system team is split in two. So our engineers are in Paris, our designers are in New York, because the front-end engineers from that acquisition became part of the design systems team. The truth is, like, there has never been any friction because of distance, because they share all ceremonies, they share all like repos. I joined the DesignOps team 2 years ago, but the DesignOps team is also older than that. And they have their own culture, to the point that I had to adapt to their own culture as their manager. And I'm like, sometimes there's a little friction. But the truth is, like, they share absolutely everything. And I think something that created that very unified culture, regardless of distance, was that they were all reporting to the VP of design, engineers included. We now engineers report to an engineering organization more. We did it for matter of fairness, so they can grow as engineers. They have like an engineering manager, et cetera, et cetera. But for a long, long time, they were one single team. And culturally, you can still feel that. It's the only team in the company who don't say like, oh, that's engineering and we're designers. It's like, no, we're DesignOps. We're in every meeting, and it's a very democratic culture as well. So they all have a voice. They all say like, I don't think that is correct. And I think, to Alexia's point about coding and such, we're kind of like outliers, because every designer in the design systems team know how to code. They code components. Then they usually still need some help from the front-end engineers, but they can make adjustments to existing components and such by themselves. There are a bunch of PRs with their name on it. So it's kind of an outlier in that world.
Just do they code before joining Datadog, or do they learn within your team?
For instance, we have one designer who came from the brand design team, so he's a pure graphic designer, but he has always been interested in coding, and he was coding more like HTML, CSS, with the frameworks as part of the websites team. But And so he ramped up to more complex stuff when he
Had
joined.
to.
Yeah, he had to. And he's still learning. He still says like, "Oh, I want to be like them who know coding better." So coding is a value that the design systems team value a lot. The manager that is managing, she's reporting to me, but she's managing the design system. She knows how to code. I was a front-end engineer, so we all have a certain knowledge of what it takes to build a component, what it takes to maintain, what it takes, the technical aspect of it.
All right. I want to react to something you said earlier. You had one leader for engineers and designers. You had one shared manager. Many years ago, I've been in the opposite situation where we were a team of engineers in kind of like a web agency, and we had trouble getting support from the design function in the company to bootstrap our design system, and we ended up hiring designers within the engineering team. And there was something very powerful in that, is that when people all have kind of like the same availability and they have the same direction and order of priorities, then velocity is kind of like a byproduct of that. It becomes really easy to build things together and to kind of schedule everything that needs to happen within an org. And I think there's something here that Back Market does really well. It's like kind of organizing and scheduling technical projects so that we are focused on the same topic at the same time. And maybe you can share a bit of insights on this, Loic.
Yeah. So at Back Market, there is a dedicated team about the design system. But yeah, like I said before, I think it's important to also specify the boundaries of the team, like what you have to do within this team and what is not, what you're not in charge of. And there could be some frustrations. When you build a design system, basically you are building a framework within your company. And when you had a framework like this, when you add it, you obviously add some rules. So obviously you have less freedom sometimes, and some people can complain about it. But it's something that you have to, you can anticipate this. You know at the beginning what is going to be the impact. So this is what you're going to sell, but you also know that what I'm going to be looking at is the velocity of the team. What I'm going to be looking at is the quality, the ability to, I don't know, add themes or whatever. You know what you're going to bring by adding this team. And I think that's what Back Market does well, not only on design systems, but on a lot of teams like this. And I think it's critical, because when you have transversal teams like this, you have to know what to expect. Because from an external point of view, when you think about it, when a team is not, especially when you have designers or front-end engineers, you expect to have something on production. Like you're like, okay, I hired some people. Where is the product? Where is my feature? So if you have nothing, like you're like, okay, what happened? So you need to know what they're going to bring, and you need to know where to look at. And when you have a design system team, you're not looking at their product. You're looking at somewhere else. So how fast am I building it, etc. So your KPIs are different, and you need to have it clarified within the whole organizations. The second thing I would add is that I think it's important also when you have teams like that to not be blocker for everyone, because this is not what you want. If you have a design system team, if you want something, I don't know, perfect, and you are completely blocker and you are adding new processes, new meetings, so since you like meetings, and if it feels like for everyone it's more complicated than before and you don't feel the change on the product, it's not successful. Mm-hmm. So to avoid that, you can also think about the team as, again, I'm providing the framework, I'm not providing the content. I'm not going to build everything for you. I'm not going to build, I don't know, the components, for example. I can give you the guidelines, just like you said, you worked at first on the guidelines. That's the mindset. So you can provide the guidelines. You can provide, for example, the tools. We were talking about Storybook. I can help you to set up everything you need to test it, to validate it with everyone, the processes, the organization, the teams, the acknowledgement of everyone. That's why it's important. And in the end, like, you need to ensure that it's going to be as fluid as possible. So, for example, in system teams, you can have ownership but also leaving everyone to code on the code base of design systems, even on several stacks. You can have people working, I don't know, on iOS, Android, and web at the same time for design system. Like, whatever fits for you, but it needs to be clear for everyone to have clear expectations as well.
If I can react a little bit to what you said, what both of you said. The design system at Datadog historically has been a very reactive design system. So we don't create hypothetical components. We don't say like, this is going to be the best input field ever in the world that covers every possible case. We're more in the game of detecting opportunities, and sometimes we're like, oh, that team and that team are doing a similar component, and our job is to say like, hey, why don't we make it, componentize it in a way that anybody else can use it, since it's working so well for the two of you. So we have been very wary of trying to being the design system that starts something. We're more the kind of like conciliating different parts and helping people share among them more than.
But like, were you building the new components? Because like one drawback you would have with this organization is that since you can say, okay, this component is for everyone and I'm not in charge of building it, what you would usually have in every team is like, okay, it's for everyone, so let's have someone else building for us. And then I just retrieve the component, and it's not on my bandwidth, and that's it.
Well, we have like a system. For instance, we have Druids, which is our design system, and now we built an internal tool called Docs Builder that allows every single team to document their own components, and that you can search across all the documentation. So you can say like, oh, the logs team has this little module. I want to use it, and I can reuse it from them, and it's them, the owners, that are going to update it. But if we, as design system, we start seeing like, hey, this might be used by 5, 6, 10 different teams, maybe it deserves becoming a component. But and we just help that logs team componentize it. So we have like know-how on componentizing, and we just like act as partners. So they build like a super cool component.
That's cool.
All right, I kind of want to circle back on scalability, and I would say the role of ops, right? You're really illustrating what it's about here. Of course, we can be like delivering content, and we can deliver only so much content with the time that we have. And we could easily make the same parallel with infra, SRE security teams. If you provide tools, infrastructure, if you provide guidelines for people to kind of become autonomous in solving the problems that you care about, then of course you have such a wider impact.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just wanted to kind of like celebrate what you're saying, because I think it's such a great way of doing things. And maybe it's time to talk about how we front-end engineers, how we can help other people in the organization that we work at. And I'm gonna, go back to you again, Yu Ling. As a front-end engineer, what would you say are our responsibilities towards the rest of the org?
I think our responsibilities is actually doing something that would help us later on implementation, would be to be able to intervene at different steps of the project, so specs, design, and then during implementation. When front-end engineers are involved at the specs time, as we all know, we're good at spotting edge cases. We also know how the platform works, so it's easy for us to like project the specs onto the app and understand if it's gonna fit, or if there are any constraints or edge case that would actually question the whole spec and how the feature works. For instance, we had different recurring entities to be displayed to users. So we have an automation that creates tasks and actually a whole workflow, so different sets of tasks. And we are asked on a feature to be able to link the two of them and show it to the managers of the workflow. As an engineer, you know that maybe there's a relationship between the task and the workflow that is one way and not the other way. So if you're looking at things from the task perspective, maybe you don't know like who created it. And so when you're asked, okay, I want to be able to let user know what has created the task, then you can bring your own insight and say, okay, it's not that easy. So if you give me only 2 weeks to do that, I might not be able to do it. And if you intervene at that time, then you save a lot of time because you create a discussion on, okay, let's find a compromise. How can we display the information that is quick enough to retrieve, but at the same time can bring value to the users? And then when you move on to designs, if you can bring as well your technical perspective, you can spare some time to the designers designing something that you won't be able to do within the time frame that you have. So, for instance, if you're asked to build a chart or complex behaviors like drag and drop, then you might be using a library. So, explaining to the designers what the library you would be using, making a proof of concept on how it would work, gives a better idea to the designer on how the design and the UX is going to feel like. And it's great to be able to participate to these different moments of the feature. And at Pigment, we have like reviews of these different steps. So the spec, we do reviews on Notion, we add comments, and then we discuss from there. On the designs, we do reviews on Figma. We as well put comments, hey, did you think about this? We have permissions on this feature, so what happens to the user that lack permission? What will they see? And then they can add a whole more mockups to handle this case. And be able to participate upfront will save you time, because if you start implementing, you see the edge case, then you go back to the designers and say, hey, there's something wrong. Sometimes it's just adding up something. Sometimes it questions your whole strategy. So you want to be able to intervene at that point, and making yourself available for that is very important. What we do at Pigment is that we involve designers to our stand-ups. So every day we say, I'm working on this, and the designer will also say, I'm working on this. So it will help, you know, these moments of reviews, like, hey, I'm working on this, so you should be able to review it by end of the day. I'm waiting for feedbacks. And that's how you create this discussion.
Right. I'm turning to you, Loic. From the perspective of a front-end lead, are there any kind of pain points or recurring issues that are brought up to you by other teams, like maybe product, maybe backend, maybe design, about the way that front-end engineers operate?
I think it's the one I was talking earlier. Like how to make sure that we work on the right things and we have like all of the capacity of the front-end team working on what we need to ship as fast as possible. And when you have a team not working directly on the product, you also need to rely on the organization and on the team that, yeah, okay, I know they're not working directly on the features, they're working on the design system, but like it's going into the right direction. I think it can be frustrating. It's also not easy with, you know, when you have conversations on Slack, on a lot of different support. Could be, you were talking about Notion, it could be Jira tickets, it could be on PRs, etc. So you have multiple channels, and you need to be able to centralize all of the information and to optimize all of this, and again to give confidence to everyone into the organization. So I think it would be one of the biggest issue. And the second one, I think you also talked about it with React, is when you have to migrate something with not like directly having a direct impact on the business and product. Mm-hmm. Like you need to do something, you see the value, and sometimes just you have tech debt, so you have to pay it at some point. And yeah, it could be challenging to push for migrations, for example, within squads, when you need to align a lot of different squads with a lot of managers. Because when you think about it, like when you want to work with agility, with a lot of squads, and you're telling everyone, don't worry, you can work like just as if you had your startup within the startup. You can organize yourself whatever you want. This is great when you are in the team. When you work transversally, you work with, like, let's say 10 people, you're told that they can work however they want, and you need to align them. So I think, yeah, the alignment across the company when you are facing, different challenges. For example, when you work on payment at some point, and on the other side, you're working, I don't know, on FAQ, or like very different challenges, and yet you also want to centralize some stuff. You want to make sure that people will talk to each other, because even if it's not obvious, you can mutualize some work. And sometimes you also want it because you want to centralize the resources and make sure that you will do the same work only once. So I think it's important to have an overview like this. But again, it's also triggering a lot of conversations, because you are adding meetings, you force people to synchronize when they wanted to work by themselves on their side. So it's a balance, not always easy to have. But I think it's necessary to be able to have an overview of what people are doing, and to challenge what they do as individuals or as teams.
Mm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying about having to align everyone on the front-end side, and I feel that we have the luck to have the tools to do that. We have ESLint rules, we have Prettier to help format on save, and from there we're able to set out rules about namings, about how you order your import, or just to make development faster. And it was a funny story. We were like just deciding on the naming of how to name helpers to build dummies for testing. And we were arguing on Slack, like, let's suggest names. And we had a full stack engineer replying and saying, I find it fascinating that you're debating on how to name this little helper, while on the backend side, we're not even agreeing on the number of characters per line. And so I feel it was very funny, but at the same time, I felt very lucky to have those tools to be able to align all the stack in the front end, and that's very valuable, and I think we should definitely leverage it.
And actually, to add also on this, so we need to align as engineers, but when we talk about design systems, we also talking about a design system which could be replicated again on mobile apps, so different stacks. So do you name it the same way or not? And with designers, they could have their Figma files. So again, same namings, same conventions. We were talking about source of truth. Where is it exactly? And if you build the same thing in different ways, like it's bound to happen that you will have some differences, and you need to be able to spot it as soon as possible. And if this is necessary, to fix it, because sometimes the answer could be, we don't care. But you need to have these people also as kind of stakeholders to say that, okay, we need to work on this, we need to align, or let it burn.
All right. Any practical tips for front-end engineers to make their work visible and to give opportunities to others to kind of like what you were talking about, spotting mistakes or spotting misalignments?
For the engineers directly, or for leaders?
Us as engineers, is there something specific that we can do to make sure that we allow these conversations?
I think we need to align on the way we work. Just like you said, it could be rules on the engineering side, so just like linters, but it could be like communication. I think a good things to try within your companies is to try to perform the onboarding again as a newcomer. And if you're struggling about it, I think something's wrong. It needs to be super straightforward. You need to be able to access everything quite fast, and the information should be quite fast as well to reach. If you're wondering about where to find some specifications or whatever, it could be again on Jira tickets, on Confluence. I think this is the tricky part. The organization. And afterwards, as long as you have your organization and you know what you're looking at, again, if you have clear KPIs, when you push something, could be features, could be updates of design systems, could be specifications or whatever, you can present it. I think it's also a way to get feedbacks, to be visible, and to be challenged as well. So yeah, I think this is like a whole cultural thing to have within the company. It's not only tied to engineers.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Pedro, what can we do better? To help you as kind of like as designers, what can we engineers do better?
Well, both of you touched on communication, so I'm not gonna be very original here. Now the truth is like, just be friendly. You know, it's like, many designers don't come from a engineering background. Many of them don't literally care about how things are built. That's another problem. We're gonna have some time after that for that. But the truth is like the cases where I have seen more success in collaboration between engineers and designers is when we tend to follow the mantra of let's meet them where they are. So, for instance, on the side of designers in Figma, we have links to PRs. We have my Figma Genius builds a bunch of little plugins so designers can go and see the actual documentation of the design system, and actually it points to the playground of the components so they understand the different variables and whatnot. But also on the engineering side, for instance, in Jira, we have precisely the links to the opposite. And so engineers who dare to come to a design review, who dare to say like, hey, we have a problem here. Like the design that you built, we cannot build it for whatever reason. And instead of saying, this is why I cannot build it and explain the technical reason, just simply ask the question, like, what are you trying to achieve? Why is this worth building? And sometimes it's worth it, you know, sometimes it's just worth doing it. Or sometimes it's like, we're trying to achieve this, and you as engineers, you can say like, well, there's another way of doing that. What if we do this? And sometimes designers are like just super happy of having that alternative, and it goes super smooth. So it's this notion of trying to meet people where they are more than trying to bring them where we are, because there's always going to be some resistance to bring them. Both us as designers bringing you, or you as engineers bringing us, there's always going to be a resistance. But if we start from the mindset of, I'm going to be there for you, you know, where you are, I'm going to meet you where you are, I'm going to sit next to my engineers if I don't sit next to them, stuff like that.
So you're touching on something interesting here. Sometimes we don't really understand why someone has a different opinion. Like, why don't they agree with our proposal, and why do they want something else? Why are they pushing for something else? And we can easily kind of lose sight of the fact that we have a person on the other side who can actually explain to us why they have a certain idea, why they believe in something. And sometimes it's kind of important to try and understand what problem are you trying to solve, and what need do you have, what worry do you have, or what knowledge do you have that justifies why your proposal is useful. And very often, starting back from the different insights and elements of knowledge that different groups have, we can find new solutions, and we can reimagine the design space that is not available if we're just trying to compare proposals and kind of like headbutt.
To give you a very concrete example, for instance, I was not so long ago in the New York office, and one of the design directors came to me and said like, hey, why is DesignOps blocking this PR? And I was like, okay, you're talking about PR, that's an engineering thing, let me go to the engineers. And I went to one of the staff engineers who was the one like putting a thumbs down on the PR, and I was like, what is going on? And he was like, well, I'm blocking it because look at this, you know, and he showed me the PR. I saw the bugs. They were not technically, they were visibly physical on the thing. And I was like, but they want to go fast. It shouldn't be perfect. Why are you blocking it? And he was like, because they're pushing into the prod. Why don't they make a hash? And I was like, what is a hash? and he very calmly said, like, okay, we have this system, so you can create a hash, and it's just visible internally, or you can like push to prod, and everybody sees it, every customer. And I was like, okay. So I went back to the the design director, and said, like, okay, why are you guys not doing a hash if what you told me is that you wanted to test internally? And they were like, I don't know, because we want to go fast. And I was like, yes, but fast doesn't mean exposing everything to everybody. And so we started to have that discussion even between. So I took the side of the front-end engineers, saying like, hey, they explained this to me. I tend to say that I'm a very stupid person, so I need everything explained for dummies, so I can explain it back for dummies. And I was like, yeah, but this is why it's blocking. And then we started to have a proper conversation, even among designers, of like, oh, we need to review these things, we need to change these things here, and we can tell our. And so that design director went to her own front-end team, so the front-end team for that team, and she was like, yeah, why don't we make a hash? You know, like, you guys wanted to push the prod, but why is that, you know? And so we started, like, it started from just having that conversation with that staff designer, taking the time to explain, to dumb things down for me in a way that I didn't felt dumb. And then I could re-explain it to my own peers and to their own peers, and it circled back, and we found a solution. But it's just this matter of go on and talk to them, you know. Literally, this staff engineer was in front of me, sitting in front of me in the New York office. So I was like, I'm gonna go there and ask.
All right, super. Thank you so much, all three of you. This was super insightful. I think we've reached the moment of dinner. We've been talking for some time. I'm sure we're all hungry and thirsty. Just before we transition to the social part of the evening,
I think we can take questions if we can get the mic to work. If anyone has questions.
we do have a question at the back.
Oh, no, but it's working. Look at it. You can scream into the mic.
My voice is really annoying. I'm sorry.
Really closer, no worries.
So thank you so much for. Yes, thank you so much. Okay, we're using the microphone. Perfect. Thank you so much for this really insightful, different types of POVs and perspectives. I just had a question regarding the synergy between front and development teams and also designers. Do you think that the role of product manager can actually facilitate this synergy, or it can actually create more problems between you two? What do you think is better? A designer to speak directly with the developer, or a product manager to be in the middle and facilitate this conversation?
I'd say it's better if it's direct, because you can always deform, and if you don't understand, like, you need to translate it to product, and then product translate it to tech. So there could be lots of misunderstanding. While if you go direct, then you save time, and maybe you have really a discussion to make sure you understand in your own words, and not in the words of the product.
Thank you.
Yeah, I share that viewpoint. I think designers and engineers, like, they speak a language that is much closer than engineers and product managers, and it's often, I would say, harder to like really communicate and exchange with a product manager than a designer.
I think what the product manager can bring at that point is poking the two of them and say, hey, come on, guys, talk, because I want this to be done.
That was exactly what I was thinking.
Right.
And I want to be the advocate of product managers here, because you guys, I don't know if there's any product managers tonight, but don't worry, your role is still necessary. I'm seeing a lot of discussions beyond developers. I think this is outside developer scope, but on the discovery side of things, when it comes to leading research, connecting to business impact, where I still think product managers have a big role to play. So yeah, we don't have to be scared of developers and designers working more directly together. We don't need a PM to interface every single aspect of collaboration. Any other question? Yeah.
Maybe about the last question, I also wanted to answer about it because in my last job I was the tech lead of our design system, and one of the things that I had a lot of difficulty with was the priority on components. How do we set the priority between which components we should develop first and which components were needed by our teams? And so I feel that this is where a product manager could be interesting, because he could talk with other product managers, know what the needs of their team will be, and this is the value it could bring to design system team, I feel.
I can disagree on that. So I'm gonna take that bullet. No, the truth is, like, I understand what you're saying. For instance, we don't have a Datadog. We don't have a PM for the design systems team. It's a team built between engineering and design. And I think the perspective, well, PMs have different roles in different companies. For instance, when I was at Criteo, they were very technical people. They were almost like half engineers, all of them. When I was at La Fourchette, it was very like commercial and like the product experience, so they were closer to designers. So they can bring different values, but we don't have a PM, and the way we prioritize ourselves is, like I said, all of the front-end engineers, they sit together in the cafe, in the 6th floor over there, and they understand the technical impact of components, which is very different to the experience impact or the commercial impact or the speed impact. They understand also, like, if you build this component that is used X amount of times, you're gonna save X amount of pain and headaches to all those teams. And that sometimes requires a very technical understanding of how the components are built, how like the different pieces of code interact with each other. Which is, like, once again, if you have a PM in the design systems team, they probably should have like a strong technical component more than PMs who work on like customer-facing features. Yeah.
And actually, yeah, I had something to add about this. To me, it depends on, again, your organization. If you're working and building directly the components for different squads, you also have prioritization within the squads. So you know, theoretically, which project is more important than the other. So you can just give back like this kind of decision to stakeholders, saying that, okay, I have 2 teams asking for something. I don't have the bandwidth to do everything. Which project should I prioritize? Or also, the thing I was talking about earlier, it could be a sign that you are kind of blocker for several teams. Maybe you don't have the bandwidth to answer to everyone, which is kind of normal. I guess you could have this situation as well. And just like you said, actually, with components, this is also, it could be a reason to give the keys to like the teams. Like, you build the engine, but you give them the keys. Like, you have the framework, you give them the rule, but at some point, maybe it's time for them to build and contribute to the design system. If they were not doing it, it could be a sign of this.
Yeah, I also kind of like want to add something. You were talking about a person prioritizing, and you know, it could be an engineer, designer, product manager. At the end of the day, I really rather have a repeatable process for prioritization rather than a person, you know, choosing priorities. Yeah. Because the issue with prioritizing is at some point you're going to tell someone, no, I'm not available for you right now. I'm not going to work on what you need right now. And it's extremely important that the person who you're going to deprioritize understands why working somewhere else with somebody else for someone else's needs is going to provide more value to the business, right? So it can be anything. It can be like business-centric metrics. It can be things like frequency of use, severity. But if the process is repeatable, then people can get behind not having access to you as a kind of shared resource immediately. And then of course you can be opportunistic, and if they understand that something is not critical enough for the business, then they can take it in their own hands.
And you need to rely on a process, not a person. Like
yes.
If someone's not here, yeah. So yes, even if you're on vacation or if you're not available, like you need to rely on a process.
All right, we had a next question at the back of the room.
Hello everyone, thank you for the talks. I had a question. When you build a design system, it's always it always comes to philosophy when you decide to put a component or not inside the design system. If there is like one design system philosophy to rule them all, or is it like one case for every design system?
So I'm tempted to say you need to have a repeatable process.
I think the process is key, but so having a guideline, having a way to decide should I create this new component or not, but then the underlying rules that help you make the decision, they should be tailored to your team. So as you were saying, it depends on the organization. If you have an experienced front-end team, then maybe you can go more crazy because people are more UX friendly and will make good use of your components. If you have more juniors or if you have full stack that have less UX affinities, then you don't want to do that because otherwise they will use it in their own way and you won't be able to control what is in their hands. So I wouldn't say there is one rule and one secret recipe to make it work, and I feel that you would always have to adapt, maybe depending if your company grows, as you were experiencing at Datadog, then you need to change your ways sometimes. So I wouldn't say there is one way to go.
And yeah, I think just like sadly everyone here, I'm sure, built already in their life at least one carousel, or designed or built. I think it's the same. We all have the same need. It's not always the same answer, not exactly, even if you have the same kind of behavior behind. I think what's important here is to know where you want to go, and if, I don't know, a design system of another company is not fitting your need, feel free to change the process, to test things, to see what works for you. And if it's not working, feel free to test, just like on any product, actually.
I would say that you said you need to know where you want to go, and I would say you also need to know where you're coming from. Because part of so a design system is supposed to answer to a specific need, and that changes from company to company. So some companies are going to be driven by efficiency. Like we have X amount of front-end engineers, we want them to go super fast. Some other companies are going to be driven by consistency. Like our brand is everything, so everything needs to be on brand, perfectly defined. Like you were talking about the France Télévisions, rebranding and such. So like brand is the driver, efficiency can be the driver, alignment can be the driver. So each of us will have a different drive. And so as long as you understand that, you're gonna understand which component or which part of the system brings you more benefit in that regard.
Thank you.
All right, I think we should be taking just one last question.
Okay, we're gonna play Eeny, Miny, Mo. Proof. Sorry.
We'll still be here in the room afterwards.
Thank you for your insights. I have a question. I am a product designer, and I'm already trying to involve the developers I work with. But the question is, when do I should start involving them? Because we have a lot of conception steps. We have all the discovery parts. We are used to test or mock-ups and so on. Then we are improving them. Then we are testing again. So we don't want to waste developers' time, but we also want their feedbacks. So what is the best time to start involving them?
Do you want to get that one? Or?
I can give you the perspective of another product designer. But for me, you're asking when, and I would say more important is how you get them involved. So you have to understand that at different stages, they can be involved in different ways. So even from your discovery phase, maybe you can just send them like the summary of your discovery phase and say like, hey, we're gonna build this. If you already see any impact to you, let me know. And maybe they're gonna stay silent, but at least they know that something is coming their way. And so the more and more you approach, so it's more like a curve. So the more you get closer to the integration part or to the coding part, the more you need to get them involved. But you can always tell them from the very beginning, we're going to build this feature. We're going to change this way of doing things. But it's just a matter of how. So sometimes it's going to be just an email. Maybe then it's like, hey, why don't you come? We're going to do a presentation of what we have, and so on, until you get to the point where you sit next to them and you're like answering any questions they have.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree on the technical perspective. If you just put the invitation, it's optional, but it's there, then it's the developers to manage their own timing. And the fact that you're opening the invitation, it involves them. So if they're interested in why you made the choices you made, then they would get involved in the research and just to understand if they don't have anything to challenge at that point. And then along the wireframes, like if they can spot an edge case at that point, then it's interesting for you. And sometimes it doesn't need to take that much time. You can just have a little presentation, as you were saying, on, okay, here's the flow, and then let them do it, give you feedback asynchronously. It's not going to take them meeting times, but at least you got a few time to explain the whole strategy, and it could be at the time where you would be presenting that to the product manager. So you can just do 2 in 1, and yeah, depending on the how, but you can involve them at any stage. Just open the invitation and let them come.
And yeah, to me, take an example of some things that didn't work recently within your team, like of something you shipped, for example, that didn't work and you have to rework, or a lot of back and forth with engineers, for example. You can take an example that actually it's finished already, but you can look back on this, bring the engineers, and look at what didn't work, and ask them directly, like, when would it have been great for you to be involved, at which point it would have been efficient to avoid, I don't know, the crash at the end of the project or whatever. But yeah.
All right. Thank you all for your insights. Please give a warm round of applause to our 3 speakers. Very happy to have them tonight. And I would also like to thank the team at Figma and the team at Frog for this really amazing support that we've had for organizing the event and for the production quality here tonight. So thank you so much.